Hello and welcome to Weather Unlocked, video number 28. We'll be discussing flooding today. My name is Megan Terry. I'm the service hydrologist at the National Weather Service in Springfield, Missouri. I'm going to share with you what a flood is, the causes and types of flooding, why flooding is such a hazard in the Missouri Ozarks, ways that the Weather Service detects flooding for use in warnings, and some flood safety information. All right, let's get started. So, what exactly is a flood? Many of us have seen images like the ones here, showing water that's getting into buildings, covering streets, flowing over bridges, and closing roads. What these all have in common is that they're usually dry. So a flood is defined as an overflow of water onto land that is normally dry. So let's look at some of the causes of flooding. Probably the most common type of flooding, especially in this part of the country, is from heavy rainfall. So we will get so much rainfall in such a short period of time that soils cannot absorb the water enough, and the extra rainfall goes into runoff, and that produces the flooding. Also, we may be in a situation with a rapid snowmelt. Say we have some snow sitting on the ground, and then we get rainfall on top of that. That causes the rapid melting of the snow, and again, the soil may not be capable of absorbing all of that extra moisture, and so we'll get flooding from rapid snowmelt. In coastal areas, we may see floods from high tides. And high and low tides happen every day, but occasionally a tide will get so high that it will push water onto land and flood roadways and sometimes buildings. Ice jams occur during the winter when water freezes on rivers. This blocking of ice can cause flooding upstream, and it acts like a dam to prevent water from flowing downstream. Also, we may see flooding as the result of dam and levee failures. Again, a lake or a river may just have reached its holding capacity and begin to overflow the dam or the levee. So let's look at a few types of flooding. We'll look at flash flooding, riverine flooding, and coastal flooding. So flash flooding results in a rapid movement of water, and usually due to heavy rain, but can be some from the other causes that we just discussed. But the water is flowing very fast. It can lead to rapid erosion, and if someone unfortunately would choose to drive across it, it may end up pushing their vehicle downstream. Riverine flooding is a slower flooding, but again, your rivers are filling up and overflowing their banks and leading to flooding of roadways and buildings. And then finally, we have coastal flooding. So in a case of a hurricane or a large storm, will produce very high waves that will come onshore and produce the flooding. So we see a lot of flooding in the Ozarks, and flash flooding is the leading cause of weather-related fatalities in the Missouri Ozarks. So why are the Ozarks so sensitive to flash flooding? Well, we tend to have rocky soils with shallow soil depths that cannot absorb very much rainfall. And you combine that with our location and our availability to receiving large amounts of rain from weather systems that move across the central part of the United States, with the Gulf of Mexico being a moisture source and enhancing those rainfall accumulations. And then the final factor we look at, a lot of times we have low water crossings that become flooded. So low water crossings are mainly just low water bridges or even just roadways that will go through through a stream bed, and it's normally dry, but after a heavy rain, it will tend to flood. And so those areas need to be avoided. So let's discuss a little bit about the power of moving water in those low water crossings. So we get a heavy rain, and that water's flowing. Water has a lot of weight to it. Even just 1 gallon of water is 8 pounds. So if you're looking at a depth of 6 inches of fast-moving water, you're looking at about 700 to 800 pounds of force moving across that area. Most people cannot withstand that kind of force, and it could easily knock over an adult. Just that shallow depth of water. Now let's look at a foot of fast-flowing water. That will displace whatever it's coming upon, 1,500 pounds. So, which is 3/4 of a ton. So a lot of vehicles cannot withstand that force, and they tend to get pushed off a road if they attempt to cross. And then even a larger vehicle, an SUV, a large truck, when you're looking at 1.5 to 2 feet of water, that's, getting close to 3,000 pounds of force imposed on those vehicles, and can easily sweep them off of roadways. Here's a map that we've developed showing the locations of flood fatalities that have occurred in the Missouri Ozarks between the years of 1994 and 2017. And you'll notice they're typically clustered, but most of this area is still very hilly terrain and cannot absorb all the rain when we get heavy rainfall. Most of these fatalities occurred with people driving through low water crossings, a lot of them at night when they could not see the danger ahead. So let's talk a little bit about how we detect floods and use that information for warnings. Probably our biggest tool for flood detection is radar. So the radar has a program built within it that can convert the echo intensities to rainfall rates. And when we look at that on a map and we can see the location of those heavy rainfall areas, that's where we're going to be looking very closely for the potential flash flooding and eventually issuing warnings. Also, we have access to lots of river gauge data. The U.S. Geological Survey shares this with us. We do provide forecasts for a lot of rivers across the country, but we know what those flood stages are, and when the observations go above the flood stage, then we know we have a flood situation and warnings need to be issued. We have a couple applications I'll share with you now. This first one is called Flash, and it's looking at rainfall accumulation with respect to how common or how rare it is, and we look at something called average return interval. So when we see these brighter colors popping up, and I'll zoom in here on the scale a little bit, what this is telling us that for the time period of rainfall accumulation we are looking at, that amount typically occurs once every 50 to 100 years. So when we have such a heavy rainfall that it's showing up as being that rare, that is another red flag, if you will, for flash flood potential. And also, there is a satellite application called VERS that senses where flooding is occurring on land surface. So we'll see these little area of red right here. This particular one is on the border with Kentucky, Tennessee, and Arkansas, but that it is detecting flooding over land in that area. And quickly, let's discuss a few flood safety tips. Keep you safe when flooding is occurring. Of course, if you're in a low area, see heavy rain, you need to get to higher ground. Get out of those areas that are subject to flooding. Do not drive into water or walk into flooded areas. Remember, it only takes 6 inches of flowing water for that force of the water to be strong enough to knock you off your feet. Stay informed. You can monitor local radar, television, weather radio. We'll be getting those warnings out to all of those venues when flooding occurs. And always remember, when driving or walking, when flooded, turn around, don't drown. Just do not go into the flooded areas. Well, we thank you for attending our information video on flooding. Here are some resources for you. Whether you are wanting flood information or if you want to report flooding, you can call or text us at the office. Thank you and be safe.